What's up, folks? How's it going? This is Waj. Hope you guys are all doing well. Here we're going to take a look at the brand new RX 470. Now, we really love the RX 480. I still think for around that $200 price point, there's really not a lot better you can get. But now we have the RX 470, which comes at a slightly lower price point. And what we're going to do is take a look at the overall performance results of this version, which is the XFX RX Black Edition. So if you're interested, let's get right into it. Now, in terms of pure specifications, the RX 480 is very similar to the 470. Both are using the 14nm fabrication process. Both are based off the Polaris 10 architecture. There is a difference in terms of how many shaders you have on each GPUs. We're looking at 2048 on the RX 470 versus the 480 has 2304. And we have slightly lower compute units, 32 compute units versus 36 compute units on the 480. And both cards do come in a 4 gig and 8 gig version. We have the 4 gigabyte version of the RX 470 over here. Furthermore, the clock speed is kind of similar on both GPUs. And when it comes to the overall memory specifications, the memory clock on our RX 470 is clocked around 7,000 megahertz versus 8,000 megahertz on the RX 480. And in terms of the memory bandwidth, both have 256-bit bus. And when it comes to the MSRP, currently right now availability is kind of scarce on these new GPUs, but as they settle down, the MSRP should be represented more fairly. Typically, the RX 480 starts at $200 and can go up to $250 or more depending upon which version of the card that you're getting. The MSRP for the 4 gigabyte model of the RX 470 should retail for around $150 to $180. Again, pricing will definitely vary depending upon where you are in the world and what time you're purchasing. Now, the power parameters for the RX 470 is fairly straightforward. You only need a single 6-pin PCI Express power connector, and at its peak power output, playing Grand Theft Auto 5 on pretty much full gaming load, the RX 470 pulls just around 135 watts, so it's very friendly for lower capacity power supplies. Additionally, you get plenty of connectivity with the RX 470, just like you get with all the 400 series graphics cards from AMD. So you get 3 DisplayPort 1.4 connections, as well as a full-size HDMI 2.0B connector, which is good for full 4K resolution at 60 Hertz. So that's definitely awesome if you want to hook this thing up to a 4K television or monitor. Now, another awesome thing about this XFX version that we have here is that the cooler is pretty phenomenal. You have a large unibody heatsink, which has 3 large composite copper heat pipes, which is going to increase the efficiency of the cooling performance by up to 30% compared to what you see on the stock cooler of the RX 480. Additionally, you also have this really cool feature that XFX has integrated over here, which is swappable fans. So you can see that we have 2 80mm fans, and you can actually directly take them out, and there's connecting points embedded right on top of the heatsink. And basically, this allows you easier access to clean the heatsink, as well as change out fans if these original fans get worn out or broken for whatever reason. XFX is also going to launch a couple of different fans that have LED lighting options, as well as better thermal dynamics and airflow. So this is definitely exciting. It's a feature that I haven't really come across before in any of the GPUs that we've reviewed thus far. On top of all that, you can see at the back of the GPU, you have a really sleek looking XFX aluminum backplate, which definitely is going to help out dissipating the heat on the back of the PCB a little bit better, as well as look pretty darn cool while doing that. Now, in terms of the idle and load temps on the RX 470, you're looking at pretty darn good overall thermodynamics. At idle, the GPU hovers around 34 degrees Celsius, which is pretty typical for most modern day GPUs cooled by air. And at load, we're running at a pretty cool 67 degrees C at the factory overclock setting, which is certainly cooler than both the RX 480 and even cooler than the Zotac GTX 1060. Now moving on, probably one of the biggest questions that you guys are probably asking is how does the RX 470 compare with the RX 480? Based on our experience with each graphics card running on the same exact system, we can see that the RX 470 on the 3D Mark Firestrike benchmark scores around 9,700 points versus the RX 480 on its factory clock setting is scoring around 10,000 points. Furthermore, on a DirectX 12 synthetic benchmark, 3D Mark's Time Spy, you're looking at about 3,800 points on our RX 470, and the RX 480 is just over 4,000 points. Now, that being said, you can obviously overclock the RX 470 to get overall better performance, and obviously you can do so with the other GPUs, but in terms of isolated overclock performance with the RX 470, the stock frequency is about 1256 on our XFX card, and we boosted up to 1380 and boosted the memory by 400 megahertz as well. And we saw anywhere between an 8 to 12% performance bump when playing certain games, and indeed our synthetic benchmark. So with Time Spy, we went from 3800 to 4300, and with Rise of the Tomb Raider at 1080p went from just under 60 FPS to just over 67 FPS, which is definitely fairly good. And with the added cooling performance, I'm sure long-term stability won't be much of an issue. Now, that being said, let's go ahead and take a look at some other real-world benchmark results with it, comparing the RX 470 with the 480 as well as the GTX 1060. And we're not going to do any overclocking with those settings. We're going to keep them all pretty much at the factory clock specifications. So let's get right into it and see what we get. Now, to conclude, the RX 470 certainly isn't fast as the RX 480 or the GTX at 1060. The 1060 is certainly the fastest budget-oriented GPU right now, but for the specific price range, and currently right now, it's kind of tough to make the decision of going for the RX 470 because a lot of the pricing out there right now is pretty much very similar to what the RX 480 goes for. So at this point, if you're in the market right now, I'd still probably recommend the RX 480 just because the pricing on the 470s isn't really that competitive. But once the pricing goes to more normal levels and things become a little bit more reasonable in the GPU marketplace, I would definitely say for the slight performance bump that you get with the 480, if you're not playing competitive multiplayer games where you need a really high FPS at 1080p, an RX 470 is going to be more than adequate for 90% of casual gamers out there. But definitely go ahead and give us a thumbs up if this video helped you out. Check out the description for more detailed information about all the GPUs we talked about, as well as the benchmarking rig specifications. Thank you so much for your support. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you later. Take care.